Imagine this: a massive army, as numerous as the sand on the seashore, advancing with thousands of iron chariots that shake the very earth. After the miraculous fall of Jericho and that mind-blowing moment when the sun stood still, Israel was now facing the most terrifying challenge in their history. This was the most powerful coalition of forces ever gathered in Canaan. But right at the peak of the tension, God gives a command that makes absolutely no sense to human logic. Burn all their chariots. Why on earth would you destroy such powerful weapons? Well, today, we're stepping into the final battle, a moment where faith is tested through total obedience. After the news of Jericho's collapse and the miracle at Gibeon spread, all of Canaan was in a panic. Did you hear? Jericho is gone. They say their leader just shouted and the sun stopped in the sky. Their God is literally fighting for them. That fear spread everywhere, especially among the kings in the north. They knew that if they just sat around, they'd be finished. Jabin, the king of Hazor, the strongest city in the north, finally rallied the other kings. They combined all their forces from the mountains, the valleys, and the coast. Their numbers were staggering, and their iron chariots were countless. For the Israelites, who were used to fighting with simple gear, this wasn't just another battle, it was a monster ready to crush them. Fear began to creep into the hearts of the people. This is too much, they probably thought. But in the middle of that panic, God came to Joshua. His voice was short, but it echoed with power. Do not be afraid of them. By this time tomorrow, I will hand all of them over to Israel, slain. Then God gave that strange command. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots. Think about it. As a commander, Joshua knew those iron chariots could be valuable assets for Israel. But God said, burn them. Why? Because God didn't want them to rely on high-tech weapons. He wanted them to rely on Him alone. Joshua, with incredible faith, chose to obey. He didn't use military logic. He used faith. It was a radical step, choosing the unseen hand of God over the very visible, very deadly machines of war. Joshua led his troops at lightning speed. They launched a surprise attack near the waters of Merom. The northern armies, feeling invincible, never dreamed Israel would have the guts to strike that fast. That morning, as fog still covered the valley, Joshua's shout pierced the silence. The Lord is with us. Attack. The world turned upside down. The Israeli troops charged like lions. In the chaos of the battle, the iron chariots they were so proud of became traps. Everything fell apart. Israel chased them down, and just as God commanded, Joshua hamstringed the horses and burned the chariots. As the fires consumed those war machines, Israel witnessed something that changed them forever. We didn't win because of our weapons. We won because God fought for us. They learned the lesson that many of us struggle with today. Human security is a fragile illusion when compared to the absolute power of the Creator. After that, Joshua moved to Hazor, the heart of northern power. The city that was thought to be unconquerable was finally leveled to the ground. With the fall of Hazor, the great wars in Canaan came to an end. Suddenly, it was quiet. After living in constant tension, war, and tears for so long, there was finally peace. The land had rest from war. No more screams of terror. No more children running for their lives. Mothers could cook in peace, and families could sleep safely in their tents. It was the end of a long, bloody, and exhausting chapter, but the journey wasn't over. Israel now faced an even bigger challenge. How do they divide this land fairly? And more importantly, how do they keep their faith in a land full of new temptations? We have to remember, the most dangerous enemy wasn't on the battlefield. It was in their own hearts, the temptation to forget God's goodness and settle into complacency. Time passed. Joshua, once a mighty warrior, now had hair as white as snow. At the end of his life, he gathered all of Israel. He looked at the faces of the people who had fought alongside him for decades. He looked at a new generation that hadn't seen the miracles at the Jordan River. He realized that the greatest battles weren't the ones fought with swords, but the ones fought for the soul of the nation, with a voice full of authority yet gentle. He gave his legendary final message: "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." That was the final decision. They weren't called to lift swords anymore. They were called to make a choice. Would they remain faithful, or would they get lost in the comforts of the world? Joshua knew that after the war, the temptations would be even greater. Money, power, and the influence of the culture around them could quickly erode their faith if they weren't careful. He challenged them to look at the past, acknowledge God's faithfulness, and then commit to the future. Friends, the story of Joshua reminds us that often our biggest challenges don't come from the outside. They come from our own hearts. Are you still willing to rely on your chariots, your own strength, or are you brave enough to burn them all and surrender completely to God? Life struggles can be exhausting. You might be facing your own personal battle today, problems at work, in your family, or a crisis of faith. But remember, if God could win the war in Canaan, He can win the battle in your heart today. He isn't asking for your weapons. He is asking for your trust. Like Joshua, we are called to finish the race faithfully. The choice is in our hands today. Will we be a generation that holds on to the legacy of faith, or will we let it fade because we're too busy chasing our own worldly iron chariots? Thank you for following Joshua's journey from the beginning to this point. This is the end of the chapter on conquest, but it's the beginning of the chapter on keeping the faith. That legacy is now in our hands. What will we do with it? Will we choose to serve the one who brought us through the wilderness, or will we wander off into the comforts of a life without Him? See you in the final episode, The Last Choice, The Legacy of Faith. Stay strong, never let go of your faith, and I'll see you in the next story.